All right, and welcome back to Photo Tips. And today I want to talk to you about HDR images and basically a situation where you take a shot, you get it back, and you say, gosh, I wish it was an HDR if a camera had been in that setting, or I'd taken multiple pictures to merge it, because the dynamic range, it's either too blown out, it's too dark, there's not enough detail. And let's kind of see what we can do with kind of that stuff. So let me show you an image here on the screen. I think Nala's taken off, maybe she'll be back. This particular image is at Great Sand Dunes National Park in southern Colorado, and we did do a video earlier this week actually on the park, so if you want to learn more you can click on the card there up top and learn more about that. But go back to this image, it's a decent image. We obviously have the nice sand dunes. It was a decent golden hour, so you have the light there from the sun setting, but the sky is kind of blown out there, and it's just a little bit flat. So again, we didn't do HDR, this is the way it was shot, so let's see what we can do with this image, and you'll be surprised by the amount of detail we can get out of some of these digital sensors. So let's take a look here, and basically I kind of see three zones right here. I see zone 1 up here, which is more of the sky. I see this zone 2 right here, which is kind of that middle area, and then I see down here this lower area there. So first thing I think I want to do, let's just do a quick crop. So I can go ahead and deal with that here. And I'll say, about right there or so. I think that's pretty good. And I'm going to start actually with my first zone up there, and I'm going to reset some of these settings because I think it was a little bit off there from my previous setting. And we're just going to go in here and paint a little bit. It's going to be a little bit tricky because we want to darken the sky here. We don't want necessarily do too much of those dunes, at least right now. So I'm going to go in here, and you can see that blue starting to peer on through right here. And I'm going to be very careful as I approach this dune right here. As you can see, I've got a fairly big adjustment brush there with that dark circle. And then I do have as well dotted line right there. That's actually where it's going to feather off, and the effect will start to go off. But let me go ahead and zoom into 100%. And I'm going to start just being a little bit more careful. And in fact, I think I'm going to get a smaller brush. I'll reduce that size. I'll keep the feather about the same. And I'm going to start brushing along here and seeing what we can do. This may take some time. I don't want necessarily to be perfect, because then the contrast between the sky and the dune will be so great it will look unnatural. But I want to get as close as we can there. Whoops, that may be too close. And let's go ahead and zoom out. And I suspect we're going to have to do more, but let's go ahead and reduce the exposure. And let's do it about right there. As you can see, we still have that glow on top of the dune. That means we're probably going to have to come in here and paint a little bit more. So just bear with me here, and we'll go ahead and keep doing that. In fact, I'm going to keep reducing that size of that brush, and we'll go right along here. And it's going to take a little minute to do this. Okay, so I finished doing that brush. Appreciate you bearing with me here. And I think we're going to stick with that for now. I may adjust it a little bit here, but we'll go ahead, reduce that exposure. We may go ahead and bring out some clarity, bring those shadow contrast. And I see more that I lost. Got to do that. And we might go ahead and increase that contrast there a little bit as well. And then as you do that, one thing you keep noticing is you need to go back and adjust a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and do that. And again, you don't want to it's okay if you start getting a little bit of that darker area on the dunes. It'll almost make it look like a natural effect a little bit. So don't be afraid too much. We don't want to do too much, but we can probably get away with a little bit there. Okay, let's see if that's any better there. All right, definitely better along that top. Let's go ahead and start going over here again to this edge. Ooh, whoa, that's a bit too much there, I think. Go ahead and undo that. And we can start again. Whoops. There we go. It's almost like there's a shadow there on top of the dune. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm pretty satisfied there with that. Again, I might increase contrast a little bit more and increase that clarity. I do want to increase the blues as well, but I'll get back to that in a moment. Let's go ahead and jump onto those other areas that I mentioned right here. These other areas, I don't want to necessarily decrease the exposure at all or very little. I think right in the middle, it's more of a clarity thing. I want to make it kind of stand out a little bit more, so I'll go ahead and do that. And just to let you know, I did decrease the exposure ever so slightly, maybe like a quarter of a stop or so of the entire image before we got it loaded up, just because it was a tad bit overexposed, but not overly so. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and do that. I may go ahead and bring the shadows down ever so slightly, make it a little bit more dramatic there. Okay, and then I think, let me go ahead and do a new adjustment brush. This might be fairly similar to the one up top, but let's see. Yeah, again, I don't want to make that dune down there so dark, so I'm going to go ahead and take away that, decreasing the shadow. You know what I may do, actually, is go ahead and increase the exposure ever so slightly. In fact, actually let's bring out some more shadow detail there. And a little contrast, and I may pull back a little bit on clarity. I don't want to overdo it there. Okay, so I like where we're going there, and you can see we've actually now, from where we started, we actually brought out detail there, here, and there. So I think we've gone quite a ways. A couple other things I've noticed here is that it's not as warm as I might like. This is not what I particularly remember. It wasn't as blue as this. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit warmer. We'll go into that, and I'm just going to edit the entire image here. And I'm going to go ahead and take my slider and say, about right there. So I think I like the amount there. And let's see, can I make this more vibrant? Let's take a look and see. Not quite the way I want. This is something we're going to look at because we're going to have to go into Photoshop. When I increase the vibrance, it's increasing some of the colors I like the oranges and stuff like that. It's increasing some of the blues in one area that I like, and then I'm just increasing the blue in another area I don't like. So we're going to have to do some selective things. So I'm going to go ahead, turn off that vibrance right there. Let's go into our HSL adjustments here. This is Adobe Camera Raw. The Adobe Lightroom interface will be very similar. And let's go ahead here, and I'm going to say, bring out some of that yellow and orange, and let's see, I want to make those oranges probably a little bit more orange, and I think I want to bring out those yellows too. So what I'm going into hue and editing the oranges and the yellows and actually making those different colors a little bit, so maybe we can make the orange more yellow or more red and so forth. So I've done a little bit there, and I think I might go back to my color temperature, and then we'll add a little bit more in there as well. And I think, you know what? I want to fool around with my tint, so I can slide this to the left and make it more green, or to the right and add more magenta. And I'm just going to fool around that with just a little bit. I think that's pretty good. I think we backed up on the magenta just a little bit there. Okay, so I'm liking that, but I want to do something about this blue up here and everything, because it ain't quite, it is not quite what I want. But I think before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and bring my highlights down ever so slightly. These clouds actually do have some blown out white, but it's not going to be too bad. We'll deal with that. It doesn't necessarily have to all be within a shade of gray. We can have a pure white or a pure black in an image. It's not going to be too bad. So we'll go ahead there, thereabouts. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Open Image, and what that will do is, in this case, bring it into Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom. You can do the same thing as well if you want to bring it into Photoshop. But I'm going to do a couple of things, and it will be clear in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this layer, like so, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a hue saturation adjustment layer. What this does, so we have two layers here of an image, and you'll see why I duplicated it here in a moment, but an adjustment layer is actually a setting that goes on top of a layer, and that allows us to make adjustments to the entire image. But the thing about Photoshop traditionally was when you made an edit, it was permanent. Unless you had enough undos left, you were stuck with it. But an adjustment layer allows us to actually edit it even after we've done it and saved the file multiple times. So it's a handy thing to do. So I'll go ahead and do a hue saturation adjustment layer. And remember I was talking about the blues up here, so I want to go ahead and edit those blues. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to say, let's bring up the saturation there of the blue quite a bit. And I'm not paying attention down here right now. We're going to get to that because I'm sure you're thinking, ooh, gosh, that looks terrible down there. Let's focus up here for a moment. And I think I want to see about trying to make that blue just a little bit more blue. In fact, I may back up on saturation just a little bit. I think I like that pretty well. But as you can see, that's really improved things up there. But down here, we're all screwed. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to merge the layer down. So let's go ahead and do that. What that does, basically, it's going to take that adjustment layer and actually make it permanent and merge it into the layer below, but not the layer below that. Remember, we did 2 layers and they're duplicated, okay? So it's not going to affect both those duplicated layers, just one of them. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say merge down. And that merged it into there. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my eraser tool. Because remember, this is the only, this particular layer, I can actually turn it on and off. As you can see below, we have the unedited layer. So I'm going to go ahead in here and I'm going to say, you know what, I only want the blue up there because that's all that layer adjusted. So I'm going to go in here and just start erasing. As we do that, you can see it actually starts to disappear. In fact, what I'll do, let's turn off the background layer, which is the unedited picture. As you can see as I go in here, as I erase, you'll get that dotted pattern, which means there's nothing below it because we've muted that other layer. And that actually helps us see exactly what we've removed, and that's pretty handy. And I think we got some stuff down here. We'll go ahead and edit that out. Okay, perfect. So now we've got the blue we want, and we haven't adjusted the rest of the image. But as you can see, I still want some more vibrance, don't you? I think that's going to be pretty nice. So let's go ahead, and I'll do an adjustment layer again. And when you have a layer on top, it affects all the layers below. So this will affect both this layer and the layer below. So let's go ahead and do vibrance. And I'm going to go ahead and, actually, whoops, I don't want to do saturation. That's an old tool. It's kind of a bit clumsy. Let's do vibrance, like I said. Let's see, it's a subtle effect. Let's go ahead, let me go ahead and start dragging this slider so you can see. It's pretty subtle when I do this. But subtlety can go a long way. Let's see here. Whoops. There we go, make sure I'm hitting the right thing there. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with that for now. I'm going to go ahead and do another adjustment layer because remember we said it was a little bit too cool? I want to warm it up again, and we can do that with another adjustment layer. And I've used this in the past with a lot of black and white images to add tones to them. But we're going to go ahead and use it in a color situation by adding a photo filter. This is like if you put a warming filter in front of your lens back in film days. And we can go ahead, I've got an 85, that's pretty strong. I think, let's take a look here. I may actually keep it with an 85, I just want to see the different effects here. Yeah, 85 is definitely more of that orange, which I want, but I don't think I want that much intensity. Let's see here. Okay, that is looking pretty nice. And on top of that, I'm going to do one little thing. This is a quick thing, and I'm going to do it because it doesn't need that much adjustment. I'm going to go ahead and do a brightness and contrast filter. Now, if you want to get very specific, you go ahead and here and use the curves, but I'm not going to do that right now. I don't think we need that. And they've actually improved these since earlier versions of Photoshop, so it's actually pretty darn good. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to say, I don't want to overdo it here. Okay, I'm just decreasing brightness ever so slightly because I'm worried about those clouds up there. Okay, I think overall that is pretty good. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do a thing I like to do here, which is I'm going to add a little white border around it just so, imagine this is framed on your wall so we can take a look at it like a big photo critique here. Okay. Let me get that brush out of the way there. So this, in fact, I'm going to pull off a little bit here because I know your screen is slightly cropped. There we go. Okay, so this particular image right here is the kind of one that I was looking for. So as you can see, we did 3 layers. We did the one on top, did the one in the middle, and we did the one down here below. Now this one up here took us a good long while. In fact, it probably could use a little bit more work, but we're here live in YouTube, so we don't want to spend too much time. But you could spend, half an hour painting this ever so precisely. But again, it's never going to be perfect. So keep that in mind when you start making this a little bit darker, because there's just so much contrast between here and here, and that's always an issue when you do high dynamic range imagings. It doesn't look completely natural, and some people are okay with that. I'm not so much. So we did, a compromise here. But we went in here, we darkened it, We brought it into Photoshop and increased that blue specifically because Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw have a little bit of trouble there just selecting that blue and not blue down here. And we, in the middle, we didn't do too much. We increased our clarity here. And at the bottom, we went ahead and, probably brightened up those shadows a little bit. And then in the Photoshop, we did some final adjustments in our color, saturation, things like that. Just because as you start making adjustments, you say, you know what, that last adjustment I made, I want to adjust it again because it's been effective since I made a previous adjustment. So let's go ahead and save this out. I'll bring my menu tab back. And let's see here. Let's get rid of that border. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Save As. We will save a JPEG out. And I have saved out the original so we can compare here today. There we go. Okay, let's see. Before. Okay, so here we got before. It's not quite what we remember. It's fine. We have the dunes. We kind of remember our trip, but it's not quite what we remember when we saw it. So here's the edited image, and we already went through the edits, but as you can see, this makes a huge difference. It's almost, and I think the title might kind of explain this or confuse you depending. It's kind of HDR-ish or HDR-like, because we're only working with one image. It's not multiple images we're merging together to have this super dynamic range, or it's not some mode we set in the camera. This is just we're dealing with the raw file, and they're quite flexible. So to me, I like this look more than doing all those HDR things. It looks completely unnatural. So we did a good job here, I think, and I hope you think so as well. But hey, if you've got any criticism or comments, please leave them below, and make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe, make sure to follow us. Definitely appreciate it. On behalf of Nala and I, she's taken off though. I do appreciate you watching Photo Tips, and you have a good one. Bye-bye.